DeFi by Design, where we talk all things blockchain and cryptocurrency while striving to educate, empower, and enrich.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to DeFi by Design podcast, hosted by yours truly at the Rollup episode 101 today, coming off the hangover of the GM100 space. We actually had Bryan on there, which is pretty exciting. Got a lot of good feedback from that space. Actually, a lot of builders were excited to just be able to jump on 5-10 minutes, chat about what they're building, give some insights, and then get out of there and get back to work. So really was quite pleased with that feedback. And yeah, back again with another longer form podcast today. Rob, good morning. How are you doing, sir?
GM 101. I'm doing well. I think this is a great 101st podcast. The only way to one up what we did last week, I think, is to have this podcast now. So I'm totally stoked. Bryan, thanks for coming on. We can jump right into it. We were talking about kind of the on-site work style that you guys have up in Vancouver, and how cost of coordination is good on chain sometimes and online sometimes, but not always the best. Just kind of broadly, how are things at LayerZero? And then, we can kind of dive deeper from there.
Yeah. It's been wild. So, I've been remote for 15 years prior to this. So I'd always been 100% remote with everything I've ever done. We were 100% remote to start the company, went to Bahamas for 5 months and just pulled everybody there while we were there. And we just realized that was getting through to launch. And we were just we are so much more productive in person. That 5 months in Bahamas was it was like a war room constantly. We were 7 days a week in the office. I was from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. every single day, basically, 7 days a week for 5 months. But what we got done in that period, I would have taken us a year and a half at least if we were remote. And so after that, and we grew from we're probably 12 people when we got to Bahamas, and we grew to 23 or so, 23, 25 when we were there. And we just told everybody, listen, we basically if we're going to win, we have to be in person. And we said everybody has to kind of make the decision between either packing up their lives and moving or not. Every single person did. So we got 100% of people here. We're 63 people now, and it's been awesome. I can't imagine doing it any other way right now, just because we've been able to ship so quickly.
So based, everybody joins. Everybody,
yeah, 100%, man. We have, I think we have 4 Canadians, real Canadians on the team. So it's 59 people have packed up their lives and moved here, which is this huge litmus test of conviction. It's the people who are here are just in it, which is awesome. It's a great culture. Yeah,
that's absolutely amazing. And this month has been insane for you guys too, eh? Just absolutely insane. All I see is on your Twitter every other day, new all-time high.
Yeah. It's been the whole thing has been really just wild in general. I remember when we were launching in Bahamas, I sat with Ryan, my co-founder, and Isaac, our chief architect, and we were talking about messaging, and we were we're not going to need to worry. We're talking about scale and everything, about 1 million messages months. That was so far out for us. I told him I hoped to hit 1 million messages by the end of the year for the first year. And then now we've had days where we're doing almost 1 million, mid 700s in a single day. So just the engineering challenges that come with that, just in general, I was talking about it in a tweet the other day, right? Not only are we this messaging protocol that's doing massive scale, as a message delivery system, I think we're pushing 40 billion RPC calls a month right now. It's really kind of crazy.
That's an expensive inferior bill.
yeah, it's fun.
So how do you guys do it? How do you guys scale?
Ultimately it is, it's a bunch of incredible, the company was founded when we were 30 people. We were 23 engineers, engineering focused org. We have a bunch of people who have scaled systems to many hundreds of millions of concurrent users from scratch. And so it's all just engineering problems. It's absolutely solvable, but you got to be able to build a system that actually scales. And we care deeply about really 2 things. The 3 pillars of how we built are basically immutable, permissionless, and censorship resistant. Like permissionlessness and censorship resistant, we are obsessive about. We've made so many design decisions that make our lives a million times harder in order to scale the system to make sure that like no packet can ever be censored against an application's will. But it's just like, you just got to do it. And so a lot of it is just like fun. We have, I kind of talk about it a lot. Like Ryan and I, as co-founders, like our style is to sit in a room and like argue, and we will like yell at each other for like 8 hours straight. Like we will have a bunch of people. I think early on, people think we're like insane. But like ground truth is the goal, and we'll have like very heated debates. But at the end of the day, I think like we arrive at, we've thought through it with every lens, and I can't think of a single architecture that's even close to as good for what we're trying to accomplish. So yeah, it's been great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's such is the way with decentralization, right? Just DAOs take longer to make choices. Things that could be done in a more centralized manner are often easier than doing them in a trustless and permissionless way. And kind of just want to rewind a bit for our audience and everybody who's listening. You, in all your tweets of these all-time highs, and in your conversation just now about the act of being a messaging protocol, what does it mean to send an omni-chain message or a cross-chain message? I assume you prefer omni-chain, but what does that even mean?
Yeah. I mean, the way that most people think about it as kind of like this abstract like thing, that the way that I frame it to myself internally is literally identical to a packet on the internet. Honestly, you go back in time, we had all these isolated execution environments. You had DARPA and Stanford and all these university groups. And like, if I had a program or something that I wanted to run, I would need to physically take my data and like fly to Stanford to run it on the server there that like had the program that I need to like run it against. And then we like invented the internet stack, and like it gave us all of this awesome stuff. And like the base primitive of that is just like a packet. It's just two computers with an arbitrary, amount of compute. So like do some compute, generate an array of bytes, move the bytes over, and like ingest those, do some more compute. So compute, byte, compute. And that gives us everything that we have today. That's how we talk now. That's how we do like everything. And still, even with the internet, 99% of the world's compute still happens locally on a single machine. But like the internet is still the internet. Cross-chain is amazing. There's like this fundamental layer of like moving packets matters. And so when we're building this, like I view blockchains ultimately as the same thing. They're isolated execution environments. Some of them are very good at some things. Some of them are very good at other things. And this is, whether it's Arweave for storage, or Solana for throughput, or Ethereum, or any of the L2s, or, however you want to construct this, whatever it looks like, you still need some way to like pass state data between those things. So like LayerZero is literally just arbitrary contract invocation with a bytes array. So it's like invoke a contract here, generate some bytes, move the bytes, do something with the bytes. Same exact as a packet on the internet. So I see it as no different. It's just moving generic blobs of data. And then once you start doing that really well, so I was mentioning, okay, great, we're this message passing protocol, or this messaging protocol that's like moving single cross-chain messages. Now you can start to do things like, okay, now as a message delivery service, we're actually doing some stuff that's really interesting. Now, again, 40 billion RPC calls per month. The amount that we're putting into chains, we are the number one and often number 2 and 3 gas consuming contracts on like 80% of chains, literally like 80% of chains. We put more messages to those chains. We write more messages than any other. We got to the point where we were breaking layer 2s because they couldn't handle sequentially ordered messages fast enough. Like they needed to rewrite code. We needed to rewrite code, like all of this stuff. And now once you have that piece of like message delivery to a chain, there's so much that you can do with that. And I think without dropping too much alpha, or like talking too much in general, like, I think over the next series of months, people will start to see what we mean by that. We're pretty secretive in general about what we do. Like people have only, even when we launched, we're like, okay, we came completely out of stealth and like everybody paid attention. And we didn't tweet like a single thing for like 6 months. And then we launched everything, so like we're pretty prone to that in general, like just to be heads down building. But we have been building some like really unbelievable things. And I'm convinced some of the stuff we're going to launch soon is as transformative to this side of the space as anything we've ever done, including launch. So yeah, it's awesome. I love working with this group of people, and like we've really built some pretty special stuff. So yeah, it should be exciting.
Hell yeah, dude. Yeah, no, I mean, taking it all the way back to the packet of the messaging and the blobs of data, kind of in the Web 2 world. Now, right, we have the transferability of digital assets online, right? So through Stargate, we can bridge from chain to chain and do transfers of information from these contract calls, like you're saying, but also in addition to that, transfer value, which that in and of itself is a huge, like, once you kind of cross that chasm in your mind of like, whoa, this is possible, you know, it starts to become kind of what else can we do? And I just feel like you're pushing the boundaries of like what else is possible in this kind of omni-chain DeFi realm.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think ultimately, like when you have these atomic environments, it's great. You can do a bunch of amazing things, but it's very similar to like, I don't know, treat it like a bank, again, an execution environment, any server cluster, any data center, anything. Like once you start moving around, like, okay, great. Now we have all these chains. Like now you need clearing houses, but like you don't want to have this intermediary sitting in the middle. So there's just all these things that end up like that we have the ability collectively to recreate and disintermediate if you can create the system of moving that state data in a way that makes sense and scales.
This is painting a really like vibrant mental model for me. What you're saying, Bryan, like you guys and you guys have built to what you're saying. Like you've made it extraordinarily difficult on yourselves to build a system that's generic enough to spread these blobs of data. And you guys have built out this internet post office and like spun up these atomic environments that basically are able to like act as a post office where like someone can go there, send their blob of data to the other post office. It ends up getting delivered on that execution environment. Like, and you guys have made painstaking like engineering decisions to build that system as best as you could. My question is like, where does it go? Like, what is the bigger vision of that configuration?
Yeah. I mean, I talk about it a lot now. We're like, great. Right now we have 98% market share in terms of messaging volume, right? Like in terms of cross-chain messages being sent, you know, we have the super majority of everything. But like, if this is the end state, like, what am I doing here, right? You know, it's like not enough in terms of what exists now. And so I think there is an unbelievable amount more that can be done. And I think, again, some of that will sort of start to come out near term. And started that is this separation between like a pure message passing protocol and message delivery, and the difference between like all of these things. But I think ultimately, like, I think the goal is we really like, again, early on, this is not something that we wanted to build. Like we were just like three friends. We just random technologists who were like building stuff together for years. We've been building together for like 16 years now. And this started because the miners were colluding against us. So we had to like roll down our bots that we had built before Flash bots got built. And so like the miners were colluding. We couldn't do this anymore. BNB chain was like spinning up, and finally like there was another chain where things were happening, and it was like fast and cheap and just totally different than Ethereum at the time. And so we were just like, oh, like that's kind of cool. You have this entirely different execution environment. Like maybe I wouldn't want my stuff. This is early days. Like maybe I wouldn't want anything to live there long term, but like we could build a game there, right? You could do things that like are meant to be ephemeral and then move that state data back to Ethereum. And so we built like a game. We built a little toy game that was, you would open up packs of gladiators. The gladiators would fight on BSC, and if they died permanently forever. And if you won 10 matches, you were like freed from the arena, and you would mint a permanent NFT back on Ethereum. So like that was it. We just built it for ourselves. We're just like, what is a cool thing? Like let's figure out how this stuff works. And then we realized, as trying to like mint this stuff back to Ethereum, like you couldn't actually do this without some central coordinator just sitting there and triggering events on both sides. We're like, well, that sucks. That basically is entirely centralized. And so like we looked desperately for like any system that could just do us. We wanted to like do this. We wanted to build the end application. And then we realized all the bridges were terrible. They didn't do this. And so we started building a better bridge. And we're like, even then we still need the transport layer. So like this has been something, not that we wanted to do, but something that like we viscerally like felt the pain of and wanted to solve. And even now, like my big problem with middle chains in general as an architecture is just there is zero guarantee around censorship. There is nothing that associates a packet on source and a packet on destination. It all gets routed to this like black box that sits in the middle. There's no guarantee of delivery. There's no non-sorter enforcement, which means like if a governance vote is happening, I can just conveniently like forget to deliver the packets that don't align with my viewpoint. If I'm doing like financial transfers, right? So you're doing swaps, you're doing stuff between banks or DeFi or whatever it is. Like I have the ability to now not only front run and back run every single transaction that goes across. So, you know, that's HFT now. Great. Okay. You can front run, you can kind of do this. I can also hold everything in the middle and rearrange the messages so that I can extract like maximum value across the entire surface of messages, right? There's just all this stuff that's so fundamentally broken that if we start to build systems long-term on top of those structures, like it's just such an enormous tax on the end consumer. That was the whole, like most of us, I'm 11 years in this space, right? Most of us who got in early got in from like a very libertarian, like disintermediate, like that was our skew early on. And I'd like to think like a bunch of us like still like really kind of have that lens of ethos. And so, no, I think the first part is like making the system that does that and can functionally be the building block to build. And then after that, there's a near unlimited amount that you can do. Yeah.
I'd like to go real quick on a disintermediation tangent. And then I'm sure there's questions there to ask about mental models and how you think about middle chain, omni chain. But I want to ask about like this system that you've built. I'm thinking of it as like an internet post office. And to me, that just sounds like email, you know? So like, is that part of the bigger vision? Like disintermediate the email providers, build a decentralized email service provider?
So again, for us, it's the packet, right? So like, if I give you the ability to make that packet, you can make email, you can make bridges, you can make banks, you can make anything that you want, right? Ultimately, my job, how I see it, is to build that base primitive of the packet and make it as safe, easy, and cheap as humanly possible for you to be able to move that. And like, sometimes those are trade-offs, right? Like sometimes, are you going to verify transactions directly on chain versus doing it in a black box? Like, yeah, that's going to be a little bit more expensive than a middle chain. You will be able to get it cheaper, but the trade-offs are immense, right? And so it's this sort of like contour of all of the things that you want. But the goal is make that base primitive that is good enough for your smallest possible NFT project moving, you know, whatever it is, POAPs for like your local games club, all the way up to like the DeFi protocols dealing in multi-$100 million liquidations, the people moving onboarding, you know, tens of billions of dollars of real world assets. Like you have to make the primitive that meets all of those use cases and is good enough for both.
Yeah. Whoever came up with the name LayerZero is absolutely genius, because it might as well just be like layer underground of everything online, because this just the vision expansion outside of just basically what's currently building. As you said, like if all you've done is just a build for what we have currently, which is like fun NFTs and DeFi games and financial primitives, then like, you know, you failed, right? But when you put it at that lens of like underpinning what could be, let's just call it the future of the decentralized web, the name LayerZero starts to really just stick. So props to whoever came up with
that. That was all Ryan. That was all my co-founder. So I'm god awful at naming. He's come up with every good name we've ever had.
Nice. Kind of shifting gears a bit towards some of the practical things that you guys are doing in DeFi. So I saw in the June recap, I think you pushed 16 million messages in June. And 35 million total. So nearly half of the entire total of messaging happened in June. And I think a lot of that has to do with some of the integrations that you guys have been doing. It seems like the BD and integrations team has been really putting in work there. So I'm just kind of curious what does that look like for kind of the integration side. So, you know, a project approaches you, or you approach, let's say for example, recently Arbitrum Nova and Scroll Testnet were both integrated. What does that look like? Kind of how does that process happen? You know, and I guess what's kind of the unique kind of selling point or aspect that these teams want to connect, or you want to connect with them?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's like two types of integrations. There are the chains. So basically the end LayerZero is meant to be 100% permissionless, right? So any application wants to come build, they just come and deploy contracts. They don't ever talk to us. They don't ever do anything. Like if they come to us and they need dev help, integration help, like looks at code, whatever that is, Discord, us directly, tons of people are like around doing that, but like there should never be a gatekeeper for anybody to deploy. So 100% permissionless. We've actually had some of our largest integrations have deployed without ever speaking to us ever. Ghostly Ghost actually just like pinged me the night before they launched. And they're like, hey, we're going to launch this thing. Like, do you want to take a look? And we were like, yeah, sure. Like, we'll just look through the code. So that part has always been that way. For chains themselves, LayerZero Labs goes and deploys an endpoint on that chain. And it's usually like the thing that we index on more than anything is just like, where is developer activity? Ultimately, like we want to be everywhere where like devs are being active. We care so much more. Like part of the benefit of raising a ton of money, doing all these other things is like our runway is basically infinite, right? And so like we get to take a really, really, really long-term lens on things. And for us, it's just like we want to be the places that people are active. We don't care if people like somebody being like, I'll pay you $500K to deploy an endpoint. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't move the needle for us at all. We're not there in any form of like that. It's like, where are the developers? Like that's what we want to capture, because ultimately like every single new integration on LayerZero now ends up, you know, everybody else built on gets to compose that. So like Stargate was a great example, right? Stargate built on LayerZero. There's like hundreds of applications using Stargate, right? Wu Finance uses it, SushiSwap uses it. All of these people now started to integrate around Stargate because you have this primitive. And so it just becomes like these network effects become incredibly powerful, where again, like applications building just draw in more applications because they want to like utilize part of that functionality or the asset base or anything else that's around that. So that part has been awesome and super, super interesting. I think we're up to like, I have to check the most recent numbers. I think we're very close to like 10,000 contracts on mainnet, which is wild. Yeah.
I think that first point speaks to kind of the conceptual design of LayerZero, really kind of being that permissionless and trustless layer where teams can just come build without ever having to be in contact. I mean, that's really the ethos of DeFi in of itself, of open source code, of kind of what we're doing here. You know, and then you can kind of take it to the next level with the chain-to-chain development. We're requiring a little bit more hands-on, but strictly for the purpose of just, you know, making sure things are done properly, and you're getting the technology into environments where there's a lot of activity. And frankly, we are the Rollup, right? So we kind of had this rebrand shifted towards this kind of trend shift of the Rollup centric roadmap. Really just kind of seeing that, okay, if we're going to onboard the next however, you know, tens of millions into billions of users, we want to bring them onto rollups because we think that's the best environment for them to thrive, you know, in terms of security, user experience, you know, ZK tech, all these different things, right? So generally, I'm just curious from your personal perspective, we are a little bit biased, and if you're not as bullish as us, we are not going to get mad at you. But what's your general thought about the state of rollups, where we're heading with ZK tech, and kind of how LayerZero fits into that?
Yeah. So as a company, we've taken the stance of we're always remain agnostic, right? For us, it actually doesn't matter if there's like 1,000 orthogonal layer ones or like Ethereum only as a settlement layer and a bunch of layer twos. And actually, one of the most interesting things is that our most used nodes by far are Arbitrum and Optimism. And I always thought, okay, people have this, you know, they have the Arbitrum bridge, they have Optimism bridge. They're going to use those to go up into it because it's free. And why wouldn't you? And like people will likely pay a premium to bypass this 7-day window to like come back. So I thought it would be L2s to Ethereum. That would be the most used pathway by far, coming from the L2s, and it's actually to each other. It's horizontal composability for the layer 2s. Like as soon as people have made the decision to move from layer 1 to low fee layer 2, they treat them largely as fungible across them. And the amount of activity of like people, whether they're on Optimism, Arbitrum, Nova, any of these, like what they don't want to do is, oh, great, I like did something here. Now I need to wait 7 days to go back down to Ethereum, pay another L1 fee to go back up to the other chain and do it. So they just want to go back and forth. And so like roll-ups have driven an unbelievable amount of volume to us. We're very, very bullish, like a roll-up centric roadmap. We think it'll be incredibly powerful for us in general. And that was surprising. It was definitely not my original thesis. In terms of rollups in general, I think there's still like, there's so much open work, right? The ZK stuff is being so actively worked on. Decentralized sequencers, shared sequencers are being so actively worked. Like all of this stuff is very underdeveloped. And I think we need to see like what that looks like before you can be like, yeah, this is the way that things will definitely evolve long-term. But I think it's interesting and the teams have been great to work with. From
a general perspective of running a business and raising capital and just executing in the best way for your team and for your company, I think being agnostic is a no-brainer. And it's to have a bias in the world, in the market, is to lose out on opportunity, right? And so I think that's a pretty base choice there.
Yeah, and I joke about it a lot. Like I found Bitcoin in 2010. I was mining Bitcoin like a ton, racks of miners in my garage in 2013. I was minting Gen0 CryptoKitties. I was farming yams at like 300 million% APY. Like, and in none of these was I like, I wasn't minting Gen0 CryptoKitties and like, yes, I see the NFT boom that's coming, or like same thing with yams, right? So like, you want to be open-minded enough to like be early to all these things and like get exposure. Like I like playing with new and weird things, but it's not like I have this magical, like can see the future, right? So I don't believe in my ability to predict. My goal is build that base primitive that applies to all of the use cases and just like work with the people doing interesting stuff. And like a bunch of that will turn out awesome.
Yeah, because those people will surprise you.
Like 100%. I have been surprised many times before. So I don't leave it up to me to be a good at predicting. So,
and I think that's exactly what you're talking about, bro. Like a bias is a limiting belief, and you're cutting yourselves off from. If you think you're going to know everything, you're going to miss out on what people will surprise you. What they build and how they will surprise you. So I love the architecture choice that you made to make it more difficult on yourself, but like bask in the light of this like entropy that you find yourself like absorbing because you didn't limit your beliefs early on and you didn't limit your technology. You're able to now absorb all of that surprising energy and use cases that people build on top of LayerZero.
Yeah, 100%.
I think this kind of takes us back to the last podcast as well, which was with the founder and CEO of 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵, kind of a similar concept as far as the kind of protocol as a business model, which is build tech that can be used by everybody in the space, no matter where they are, and just kind of focus on the tech integrations, focus on activity, and these types of applications I can see can grow so infinitely large so fast compared to something that is much smaller, like let's say like just a single dApp, even if it's like a omni-chain or a multi-chain dApp. Not that those builders aren't building something incredible, but the scale of the reach of, let's call it the infrastructure layer, is almost infinite.
Yeah. And I mean, like, listen, I promise you, Vitalik did not envision like meme coins and Ponzi's as like a core use case of Ethereum when he was building it, right? But like, you know what I mean? Like you build the thing and like you end up like the use cases come after. You build the thing that has the maximum utility, and like that it's definitely not his end state vision, but he's not Ethereum's not like, oh, like we're going to eliminate those or make it. It's just an open system, and like people are going to use it how they're going to use it. You make something that's ultimately useful and go from there.
Even Vitalik was surprised.
Dude, he was
Dumping
them all.
Bryan, I have a question. How do you guys make money? Like in this protocol, integration world?
Yeah.
Like,
what's the business model?
Yep.
When you were doing this raise, what was the business model?
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, again, build the most useful system, and then stuff will emerge from that. What we see as our role, so there's sort of three components I've spun out of this ecosystem. There's like Stargate, the protocol, LayerZero, the protocol, LayerZero Labs, the equity entity, right? Stargate, the protocol, LayerZero, the protocol, they all have their own sort of models and structures. LayerZero Labs, the equity entity, our goal really is to be sort of like what consensus is to Ethereum, right? So we will build things that have direct utility to the LayerZero sphere or ecosystem overall that are additive to that. But that also are, so in consensus case, okay, MetaMask and Infura and all of these things that like get used every day and allow the broader ecosystem to sort of like grow and flourish. But they make a ton of money from those things directly, right? And so our goal is to do that. Our goal is to build tooling that grows the LayerZero ecosystem as a whole. This can be things like pre-crime. This can be a bunch of different things that ultimately are third-party services that are provided, but we don't want to have. So again, when I talk about those core pillars of how we built, permissionless, censorship resistant, immutable, right? So immutable is easy. Great. Contracts are 100% immutable, cannot be changed ever. Permissionless is like, you don't need to rely on us. If our team disappeared from the face of the earth, you never saw us again, government shuts down, bomb goes off, whatever crazy thing could happen, like the LayerZero protocol will exist until the end of time or until Ethereum makes breaking changes. Like it will be there forever. Anybody will use it. No application will be like, oh, they got some noted, like something happened. Now LayerZero is dead and all our applications are dead, right? And that's like very, very important to us as a system that there is no way that some external thing can happen. No builder should have to be reliant on us. And again, big issue with like middle chains where like it's very easy for like one node to be like dead. Every application built on top of it, dead. All of this, huge issue. And so that's one thing. And then in the censorship resistance is just the same thing. It's just like in the same way, censorship, or if our goal was to be maximally adversarial. So now LayerZero didn't disappear. Instead, we've gone rogue. Our only goal in life is to try to harm you as an application. Like we're going to try to rug you. We're going to try to censor messages, do whatever we can. There is zero ability for us to do that if you select your own parameters. Like you have full control that you, like, again, LayerZero will exist forever. And even with LayerZero Labs is a complete rogue agent trying to destroy applications on top of LayerZero, they can all just be completely unaffected, right? And so I think like building in that manner matters just an unbelievable amount. And I think ultimately is just like what drives a lot of this.
Yeah. I think if you pitch that vision to non-Web3 native or non-crypto investors, the idea behind the blockchain being basically able to run through till the end of time, and it is probably more than likely one of their first times hearing a pitch of a technology like that. It's kind of mind blowing
because again, like we don't have our own chain, right? There is no LayerZero chain. Like we have an endpoint, which is a library of smart contracts that lives on Ethereum, that lives on Polygon, and all of these other chains. As long as those chains live and survive, anybody can interact with that smart contract. So all applications can do it. And then the network for people to pick up and move those messages and how that gets assigned and all of that, that is 100% permissionless. And that in the worst case, again, everybody goes offline, everybody dies. This is terrible. Like you can just go and run that infrastructure yourself as a project, as a community bootstrap thing. Like there is always a fallback. You should never be reliant, or no application should be reliant on some third-party service provider as like the end, the end arbiter basically on the life of your project and funds. Like imagine it was like to unlock funds and then you get a government shutdown. You're like, oh, those, $15 billion locked forever. Like, sorry guys. It's just crazy.
Yeah. It helps you guys not be disintermediated. And it's like that is a moat right? Like you guys are building this thing. It's almost impossible to nerf like by yourself or someone else coming along and nerfing it, like nerfing your thing for you. Like there may be a better system that comes along, and you guys are building better systems every day and kind of layering that on top. But it's not like someone's going to come along and just shut it down. Like it's going to continue to run as long as it's useful. People will use it, and then it'll kind of like interchange, interconnect, interoperate with other, you know, components out there, and kind of like ebb and flow in terms of how useful and productive it is, like plugged into these other pieces. What are some of the intermediaries right now? Like that is one reason that protocols, and especially the infrastructure layer, is not able to be disintermediated. What are some of the like easy targets? Like what are some of the intermediaries right now in the Web 2 world that you think are prime for disintermediation?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of surfaces. There's like immediately obvious. One is obviously like look at the TradFi/HFT world, right? It's literal insanity, tens of billions of dollars per year by simply just like having a bad system where it's like an order pings to this exchange and they get to race you and just like front run you, right? And now we have MEV, we have everything here, but there are like plenty of ways to reduce that surface. Like that should ultimately long term be commoditized as much as humanly possible, where the people will do it for the absolute minimum amount such that the maximum amount goes back to the end customer should be done. So like, okay, now you have like the surface of transactions that are happening themselves. Then you look at TradFi themselves, right? Like how like send a wire, right? Do remit money, do anything. Like all of this stuff is insane right now. The fees that are layered in, like there's just crazy. So you know, the list is near infinite in terms of just like grift and just like you know,
it's crazy how stupid it is
happens in all traditional systems. So
yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, wires are ridiculous, especially when you're so used to sending ETH around for $1 or less than $1, 50 cents, 25 cents if you get it when 𝗀 is low. And that actually brings me back to an idea that you said earlier, which is some of these inefficiencies currently in the crypto market specifically, not just the broader TradFi or kind of world markets, are all just basically like another form of a tax. And like you said, I mean, if you're here right now in the crypto space, if you've been here for a couple of years, you've likely got that libertarian mindset you know, ingrained in your mind. And so this idea of like existential taxes, in addition to what you have to pay to your own nation state, is like, it's if that's not a big enough driver to build something better, then you know, you're not in the right industry.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like if you're like a tax on the technology layer, like a tax on just the surface of doing anything, like that sort of tax on the end consumer is infinitely harmful overall, just to like the world, to everything. Like you really need Goldman Sachs like taking X percentage of, you know, whatever, 3.5% for credit cards of every transaction that's ever run, basically, as everybody moves to like digital you know, pay on your phone, like all of this stuff. It's just crazy.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of a consequence of capitalism, because it has built these barriers and these walled gardens where people are trying to limit entry, and they're building up these barriers so that they can price manipulate, so that they can control the price, right? So like they can charge that 3.5% because it's very difficult to establish market share in that industry, and someone can't just come along and build a solution for 1.5% because they have established this walled garden that it's very difficult to enter. Now we have blockchains. It's very easy to just program, spin up a new execution environment, a new protocol. You just interoperate on the contracts that already exist. It's almost like we just have accelerated. Like when someone has a good idea, we just accelerate that all the way down to bare bones cost, maximum capital efficiency. And then we're basically running it at break even so that the participants in that economy reap the most benefit. And
I mean, like imagine the POS system. Just imagine the simple credit card machine being a permissionless system such that anybody can deploy onto and say, hey, you can use my credit card at 1.5%, 1%, 0.5%, just tap here. It works for all of them, right? Because the core technology has been built in such a way that anybody can do that. And the core technology has all this network effect that everybody has adopted that, right? That's ultimately the end goal, right? Right now you have this POS system where only like the Visa, MasterCard, whatever it is, they've negotiated like just us, nobody else. Like you're dead. You have no credit card access if you don't do that, right? It's impossible for somebody to enter. But if the underlying technology can be built in a way that is maximally permissionless, again, immutable and censorship resistant, like that changes so much. And yes, all of this stuff that is a tax on the consumer will just get commoditized down based on what the consumer will pay for convenience, for, you know, whatever that looks like, experience, whatever it is.
Right. POS, of course, being point of sale.
Point of sale, yeah. I mean, maybe both apply given how bad the systems are. But yeah.
It makes sense. I totally see how that could like just unwrap this like totally decentralized execution, like transaction environment where anyone can just spin up that credit card point of sale and just tap. You charge 1%, tap. You charge 2%, whatever, you know, configuration you choose. Are you guys working with Lightning Network? Because they kind of take that like point of sale angle. Are you guys doing anything with Lightning Network?
So early on, we've not done it. And so with the way we handled proofs originally, Bitcoin basically didn't have enough smart contract functionality to be able to validate an MPT proof on the network itself, right? So there wasn't enough smart contract functionality to validate an incoming proof. Since then, we've done a ton of research on how we would be able to do that in those systems, and basically have the flexibility now to move to BTC and, you know, everything else, Monero, everything else around this. And so we haven't yet. We likely will. I would say it's not likely to happen in the next 6 months, but, you know, almost 100% happen in the next few years.
Interesting.
Big things coming.
Yeah, no. Lightning is really trying to be that front-facing user experience for Bitcoin. Kind of change the idea in people's heads that Bitcoin's only a store of value, only you know, it's expensive to transact with. Kind of fulfilling that digital P2P cash vision. Yeah. Like
as you were talking, it brought up like the whole Bitcoin Cash idea, and just kind of like continuing to try to push that narrative a little bit. You know, like people should to try to scale Bitcoin so that there are some transactions going on chain, so that when we hit 21 million, there's actually some transaction fees for miners, not just a block reward. Like I think it's important if we want Bitcoin to survive that it has some transaction flow. In the form of people using it as a currency.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, you just brought up Bitcoin Cash, and that kind of threw me for a whirl, because we're just talking about if you were able to create a new point of sale system with a different credit card processor. The guy, you know, Roger Ver and Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Gold and all these, they kind of just were like, whoa, we can just create a new POS system. Obviously it's proof of work, but call it Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Gold, Bitcoin SV instead of the original. It's just kind of that same iteration, but again, because of the open nature of blockchains and forking and code, and much more feasible. Just interesting kind of loop there.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
What's your take on open source code? Because I think that's kind of like what allows that programmability and, like, you know, quick acceleration to iterative maximum, if you will. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a trade-off. I think for anything that's on chain, we're 100% open source maxi. We did use BSL for our stuff, which like gets a lot. Like obviously Uniswap has taken a ton of flack with V4 BSL. I think there are trade-offs there. But I think like when we were doing something that was just like entirely new, we knew it mattered early on to just be able to like build network effects and like basically have that, like eventually everything is open source. People just can't use it for commercial use yet. And we'll be able to eventually. So the one thing that we get flack for is that our off-chain components are not open source right now. And so there's like a couple of reasons why we do this. So everything on-chain, anything that is related to security at all is 100% open source, audited, has been from day one. Then you have stuff that lives off-chain. So like our relayer, the LayerZero Labs relayer, which only deals in like a couple of things. It deals in quoting and like a few other things completely external to security. And like, that is the thing that LayerZero Labs, our equity entity, will like run long-term. That for us is something that we don't think like, we don't need to open source. It just doesn't matter. And if we did open source, everybody would just copy it, which is fine. But we're very, very, very vigilant around like client diversity matters an unbelievable amount. Another huge thing that we hate around like the middle chain system in general is like everybody runs the same client, and like the devs of the chain just like push a new client update and everybody just auto accepts it, right? Like you ultimately just have like a single point of failure. And so like right now we already have like 𝗵𝗺𝗆𝗃, the ZK Lite client that came on, they wrote their own client from scratch. Chainlink wrote their own client from scratch. We wrote our own client from scratch. We're actually getting a bunch of other people to write clients right now, so that like there will never be a point in time in the network where like everybody in this, the ETH has had to go this direction a ton, right? So ETH used to be like super dominated by Geth, and they've like meaningfully pushed down Geth adoption with every other client basically, because they realize like a bug that gets introduced to that is just catastrophically bad for the network. It's just like death. And so like there are some reasons strategically why we've chosen not to for off-chain components that have nothing to do with security. But yeah, otherwise we're like extremely pro.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So would you consider the off-chain code and kind of technology like intellectual property or like proprietary information, just not wanting to give it out?
Yep, for sure. 100%. I think again, LayerZero, right? LayerZero, the protocol is going to exist on its own. LayerZero Labs doesn't have any special rights to LayerZero protocol. LayerZero protocol like doesn't pay LayerZero Labs money, right? That like there's no world that we would build a system like that makes any sort of sense at all, or that like we knew that would never get adopted. So this system is going to exist on its own. Anybody can step in and run execution. Anybody can step in and run pre-crime. Anybody can run any of these things. Now, again, anything that is related to security, 100%, multiple audits, open source, everybody needs to be able to see. But when you're talking about like quoting gas across chains and like how you're dealing in execution, like there is no edge for like, nobody else needs to have that. The end application doesn't care. They care that somebody fulfills it, because whoever fulfills it just means that, they'll the same security assumption for them regardless of who fulfills it. So it doesn't change their security assumption, their trust assumptions at all. But the people who can do it the cheapest will sort of be able to monetize this for, again, whatever that like lowest cost is to the end consumer. And LayerZero Labs as an entity wants to be able to compete in that market. Yep.
Yeah, that's I'm sure was part of the kind of pitch deck as well to investors, and just kind of what makes it separates you guys from the rest, and just kind of reinforces the state of excellence behind what you guys are building. So many props there. Kind of shifting towards the end of our conversation here to kind of a little bit more of a fun conversation. So not that this hasn't been a blast, but I want to talk about some NFTs, Pudgy Penguins. What's your Pudgy Penguin story, Bryan?
So I bought, I've kind of managed for us, my two co-founders, Ryan and Caleb, I've kind of managed our portfolio on and off for like 10 years, right? Like a very long time. I bought us punks very, very early when they were like cheap. And we're like, we're just going to hold these forever. Then there's this period where like, it was like 3 months and my punk went from being worth, whatever it is, like 50K to being worth like $1.1 million. And I was like, I know we said we're never going to sell these, but like, I think we have to sell these. And my co-founder was so adamantly against me doing it. He's still never forgiven me to this day. But I ended up selling all three of our punks, like absolute Pico top, sold for infinite. It was great. But he was like, he was so mad. And he was like, we have to find something else. And like, we will never sell it no matter what. And so we ended up, finding penguins just like very shortly after. I must have bought 50 penguins from 0.03 to 0.08. I bought, whatever, a bunch of all different types and rarities of penguins back then. So we bought a ton then just because we liked them, and we picked a couple that were our avatars. And then eventually, way later, I ended up paying for the penguin I have now. I ended up paying quite a bit to go out and negotiate with the person and find it and track it down. But now I think we're the largest holders of penguins of anybody. So we're definitely like massive penguin maxis. We basically never sold a single one other than we have this batch we did to experiment. We put in pseudo swap, and like we have like 5 more penguins than we put in there now. So this small batch, but we gifted every single employee in the company penguins for holiday bonuses. So we gave away, we've given away 40, 50 penguins. The whole company has them. Yeah, we're big fans for sure.
Epic. Yeah. I think what they're doing is special. Big fans as well. Was happy to see you guys in that round. So yeah. That's an epic one. There, I mean, when you see let's just, for lack of better terms, a stallion in a race with a bunch of horses, it becomes kind of an easy, okay, well, what if this works? Yeah. There's not really many. I mean, there's no other projects trailblazing that like the physical kind of reality collectible niche. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when we bought in the beginning, it was way pre-Luca, where it was like right after mint. And so we already loved them. And then seeing Luca take this project that had been so like abused and like community, everyone was rapping and, all of these things were happening, and like see Luca take over and just his energy and like sort of ambitions with the project overall. I said on Twitter the other day, it was like one of the easiest checks I've ever written, right? It told him I didn't care about the pitch deck, didn't care about anything. Like I very much just wanted to, like, we already were huge supporters of the project in general, and like wanted to support him and the team and the vision. And like they've been awesome. Infinite love for the Penguin team.
I re-listened the segment that you and Luca did on our Twitter space about brand culture. And I was sitting in front of a project proposal, and it just like flew from my fingers. Like, literally the culture from your mouth and Luca's mouth through my brain, through my fingers onto this doc. That was
amazing.
Epic.
Love it.
Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, Luca has a really interesting kind of online marketing and brand awareness mind. It's a special one.
I guess like he's come from such a different place in terms of background, where I was like a very technical background. He's full like consumer product, etc. But like when when Luca and I spend time, we'll stay up 2 a.m. just like chatting, going through ideas. Like the amount that we agree on is staggering. So even despite all of that, he's a stud, man.
Solid stuff. And last but not least, the untalkable topic. I've been seeing some shenanigans on GitHub about this ZRO thing, but not what alpha can you share with our audience that's not going to get you in trouble?
So ZRO from GitHub that people are seeing it's in the code, the LayerZero code from day one when we launched. That's always been there. That's nothing new. That has been there from the very beginning of time. Everybody can look at the commit history.
So frustrated about this.
Yeah, so that has been there forever from the beginning. I've said it on many podcasts before. Anybody who is claiming to know anything, has no idea. We still don't know. They don't know. Nobody knows.
Nobody knows anything.
And anybody who's saying they have any information is lying to you.
You guys heard it here first. Founder of LayerZero Labs, CEO Bryan knows nothing. So if he knows nothing, there's no chance you guys do, right? All right, Bryan, it's been an absolute pleasure. I could talk for another hour, but I want to respect your time. I'm sure you have a bunch of meetings and things today, busy Mondays. So thank you so much for joining on, making episode 101 absolutely fantastic. Touched a lot of really killer subjects and learned a lot today.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks so much, guys. Pleasure.
Cheers.